4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, welcome to another edition of KEU E-Talks. Today we'll be talking to Mr. Mike Payne. Mike, if you would introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background, we will go ahead and get started. Before we do that, Mike, see, this is one of those bloopers that I mentioned before. Today, we're going to be talking to Mike about knowing your why. And once Mike introduces himself, we'll talk about what that means. So, Mike.
Hey, yeah, as Tommy mentioned, I'm Mike Payne. I've been at KSC since 1990, started as a contractor, worked for Lockheed Martin USA, made the move to NASA in 2001. Been here ever since, worked in variety of divisions, PH, mechanical, NE, NEL, NEB, now in NET. I'm currently the business manager for NET.
Okay, so Mike, several years ago when we were working in the same division, you introduced me to the concept of know your why. And I was fascinated what I learned about myself and also what I learned about my coworkers that also participated in that activity. So will you explain to us what that means?
Sure. So years ago, some really bright folks, they started analyzing people and they looked for, common denominators, and they filtered things down to, there were 9 whys, and I'll get into the 9 whys shortly. And that's how people operate based on their emotion and motives down at the limbic state of mind, so at a lower level. And that's part of your makeup as being an individual and who you are. Understanding your why can be really great because you, at that point, really where you're coming from. And it's great for other people if they understand your why as well, because you can improve communication at that point. So let me touch on something here. Over the years, I found every time there's an issue, it always boils down to communication or lack thereof. So when you're asking, hey, why is your why important? So imagine if every time you met someone new, you understood their why and they understood your why, and they knew what it was that you were looking for in communication and what you were looking for your communication. Things would be a whole lot better than if you had to struggle through that and find your way. So my why is I build relationships based on trust, and I do that by, when working with someone, I find out what it is they're looking for, come up with a plan for them, keep them informed throughout the process, touching base, and in the end, make sure that, hey, I delivered what was promised and what they were looking for. The downside to that can be that, hey, if I ask something of someone else and they, don't deliver, or, they're, a little, lackadaisical about it, or, chalant, then it could potentially, if I allow it to, hurt my relationship with them or hinder developing it. So when I, talk to someone new, I let them know that, hey, if you say you're going to do something, it's really important for me that you do that, and you need to understand that.
So Mike, did you say that your why is based on trust or trusting relationships?
Yeah. So it's based on trust, or building relationships based on trust.
Okay, so Mike, did you know this about yourself, or were you aware of this prior to going through this process?
No, I didn't. It was completely new to me when I was working with an executive coach, and we touched base on this. So as mentioned earlier, this was done, this why developed by a group of people. Simon Sinek, some people may have heard of his name. He's very big on it. There's an industry out there of coaches and people that, will come in and work with companies or individuals and determining their whys. And
So what got you interested in finding this out, Mike?
well, so I part of me is I dig into a lot of things like this, um, points that get my interest, and I work through them and want to learn more about them. And so when the coach I was working with at the time, he touched base on this. I started looking into it. He gave me some material. We worked through it and figured out my why, and I was really fascinated by it. Because even prior to this, one of the things I do when I meet people is try to learn what their strengths are, to understand how to use them in a team, for the team's best purpose. So just knowing that, hey, this whole why thing was out there was an added tool that I could look at to understand people better and know, hey, how they fit in and how I fit in with them.
So it helps you to understand yourself as well as others who participate in this
Correct.
process.
Yep.
So I want to come back to talk more about your why, but can you describe the process that you went through to discover your why?
Sure. Well, so as mentioned, coaches do this, and there's trained people out there that can do this. That's probably the easiest way of doing it. There is a book by Simon Sinek out there that you and a friend that you trust can work through to do this. The process for doing this is you need to work with another person, and they need to know the correct line of questioning to ask you about say a project that you worked on and feel accomplished about, or a personal experience, as a child or a young adult, teenager working through, that was very memorable in your mind. And you keep peeling back layers of the onion with this question, and when you question someone, you don't ever ask why. The questions revolve around how. So how did you accomplish this?
Okay.
So there are three things out there. So not to cut you off, there's a why, and there's a how, and a what.
Okay.
The why is your own personal why. You also use the other 8, or potentially you can use the other 8 whys as hows you do things.
Okay. Okay. So this is done one-on-one with a someone who is a professional at doing this.
Yep. Or like I said, you could have a good friend, if you had the resource, read the book and understood it, you could have a friend, a confidant, someone you trusted. Because in doing this, you can make yourself vulnerable in theory.
So it needs to be someone that you trust, someone that you can open up to.
Yeah.
Okay. So is it possible that the questions that the person is asking you may be different from the questions that someone else is going to ask me?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. So to do this, there's no standard questions out there. You can just go ask.
Okay.
So, it's like a tennis game, back and forth. You ask the question, they respond with an answer. Based on the answer, you ask another question, digging down deeper into it until you get to the end where you can't go any further.
Okay. How long did that take, Mike?
So I've worked, well, on the side. So I've done a couple other, so I did it with myself, with my coach, and then we did a training workshop. You were part of that as well as a couple other people. And we set up one-on-one sessions with everyone. And I think generally we do that for an hour.
Okay.
You get, first you get a little comfortable with the coach, and then, you move ahead into the questions, and the coach makes sure that, hey, they're asking the right things and drill down.
Okay. So Mike, let's talk about the different whys. I think you mentioned that there are 9.
Yep.
And yours is trust. What are the other 8 whys?
So I'm going to go share share my screen here and make this
Okay.
easy. Give me a second. We should be upright.
Yes. Can you make that a little bigger, Mike?
Yeah, let me see.
Good. I can.
And I'll scroll down through them here.
Okay. Okay, good.
Let's maximize things here.
Okay.
So let's start the 9 whys. The first one's contribute, to contribute to a greater cause, add value, make a difference, or have an impact. And let me also state there is no better, one why is not better than the other, because as mentioned to you earlier, you also use these whys and how you do things.
So let me see if I understand what you're saying. If my why is trust, I may have aspects of the other 8 whys in my how.
Most definitely, correct.
Okay.
So trust, to build trust or create relationships based on trust.
Okay.
Make sense, to make sense out of things, especially if complex or challenging. So a lot of engineers tend to be in this category. Sean Quinn will share this. This is his why, and he'll let people know.
Okay.
A better way, to find a better way and share it. So as mentioned, we've done some workshops. I've got one person in NET management with a better way, and there's a couple other people in NE management out there with a better way.
Gotcha.
Right way. Yeah, there's also a couple to do things right or the right way. I also know some people with the right way. Why? Challenge, to think differently or challenge the status quo. Master, to seek mastery or knowledge. Clarify, to clarify or create clarity. Simplify, to simplify things. So one of my younger son actually is a simplified person, and I know one other person here, and we'll get into that. My older son's actually a master. When he does his work, he goes way deep. Master is one of my hows. The people that outside of work know me. When we start talking about things like this, that I go way deep on.
Okay, so Mike, before I'd like to dig into your trust, but before I do that, have you found any pros and or cons of knowing your why and that of others? I think one of them that you mentioned earlier is communication. You can find a better way to communicate with people if you know what their why is. Can you give me an example of that for your trust why?
Well, I'd say when I was found out about that my why was trust, I recognized things in past life of where things had bothered me or how I operate or how I think. So knowing that and knowing how to counter that or ensure that I counter that makes things better. So while you have a why and there's pros to each why, there can also be some cons to it. And if you don't know how to deal with that con, or you're not at, say, a healthy state with your why, it minimizes your chance of fulfillment could go down. So you might not do well at work. So yeah, simply so I with my trust why, I reached a state of being healthy with that. But at the same point, there are a lot of people out there with trust issues that aren't healthy, and by not understanding it, they don't move forward in life.
Gotcha. So let's dig into the trust why. Can you give us some insight as to a little more insight as to what that means, Mike?
Well, so and trust why. So the character traits, they're loyal, solid, committed. They do what they say they'll do. Leverages power of relationships. Will go above and beyond with what's being asked of them. Like I said, those are the strengths. Some of the challenges are, does the extra to demonstrate trust, to ensure people get what they need. But at the same time, you can waste a lot of your time in doing that if you're the person with the trust. Why? So imagine, if for myself, if I'm doing it and I meet someone new or, get assigned to something, I'll, as mentioned, I'll go above and beyond, but at some point there's, too much of that going on that, hey, I could have stopped a little earlier and met the other person's requirements.
Okay.
So you need to know, how much effort do you need to put in versus, just continually trying to do it.
So that's just, it's good if you have an awareness of not only your pros, but your cons.
Yep.
As well.
And I'll find myself, at some point, saying, hey, let me go respond to this. And I check myself and go, I've already done enough and the effort is there. I don't need to keep going at this.
Okay. So I'll share, and you know this, but I'll share my why is to simplify. And characteristics of a why, I'll just read this. It says that you are one of the fabulous people that make everyone else's life better. I'm not sure that I believe that. I'm sure that there's some others who would argue with that as well. But the one thing that it says is that I have a unique gift of reducing the number of steps required for almost any task. I break everything down into its simplest form. So I knew that I did that, but I wasn't sure why I did it. I just thought that, hey, that's just the way that I am. I did not know that was my why. And the reason that I knew I was like that, I just didn't know why, is my questions are always to the point. Whenever I make a point, I use as few of words as possible. I don't care for long, drawn out conversations. I'm one of these people who will say, give me the Cliff Notes. Give me the executive summary. I am the let me watch the movie instead of reading the book person. To me, those are all simplified characteristics. On the flip side of that, I didn't know why, but I understand now as a result of going through this process. People will perceive me to be curt, very direct. I am aware of that, and I've been aware of that for some time. I've tried to make some adjustments. They have been noticeable to me. I'm not sure that they are noticeable to others, but it's now I understand why I do it, because I'm trying to get to the point. I'm trying to simplify. And I've always thought, when I was a supervisor, I always thought, hey, let's really keep things simple. Let's make it so simple so that someone who is not an engineer can understand what it is you're talking about, so that I can understand what you're talking about. I just didn't know why I was that way until I went through this process and I was identified as a simplified person. But you're right though, Mike. It does make a difference when you are aware of the cons of that. I find myself more and more, before I just jump out and ask a question or make a statement. Okay, let's see if we can soften this up a little bit so that it will be better received. my natural tendency is to just get straight to the point, ask a very direct question. Not that I'm insensitive, but that's just the way my mind works.
Yep. And let me cut in. So as
Sure.
mentioned, my younger son, he's a police officer. He's actually has Simplify. So growing up, and we do a project, I do the engineering thing, and I turn it into engineering project, and that really didn't work much for him because the traits I see in you. So he has his own house now, and his house there's no clutter. Nothing ever piles up, much the same as your office. So my office, in contrast, I'll develop some piles of projects I'm working on, and they'll get cleaned up here and there. There'll be some disarray. So your office and his house are very much the same. Or if I try to tell him a story, he's just get to the point. So it helped me, understand how to work with him as well.
Yeah. What I'd really like to do, Mike, is to go through this process with people like my son, like you did with your son, go through this process with my son so I can understand what his why is. It gets back to communication and what type of relationship you have, or what type of a relationship that you want to have. The other thing that I want to make sure that we emphasize is there's no right or wrong. That one is not better than the other one. It's just recognize that these are some of your characteristics. They may be characteristics of others, or others may have different characteristics. The more you know about someone, and I think you said this earlier, it provides an opportunity for you to have a better relationship with them through communication. I don't have a trust thing. My biggest thing is, the perfectionist, or the master, To me, those people tend to take a long time because they're trying to get it perfect. They're trying to master. And I'm like, well, doesn't that work? We're there.
Good enough. Yeah.
It's good enough. Okay. Well, that was good. Thank you for sharing that, Mike. In closing, or is there anything else that you'd like to share about the Know Your Why concept?
Well, there's plenty of information out there. And like I say, if someone's looking, look up Simon Sinek. When I got into this, I've got like 3 books that he wrote on it. There's that master side that I started going into to go look at on my how. There's plenty of videos out there on YouTube, material you can go find if you're interested. I think, if everyone knew their why and we were open about our whys with each other, I think it'd be a much easier work environment and improved communication. And that's part of why I did a why workshop with NA Team Management and some other groups over the years.
So as a result of that workshop that you did, Mike, have you seen any or observed any impacts as a result of that?
Well, we actually did it during COVID. So
okay.
We did ours about, I think, 2 months ago. But, the coming out of it was people really found it interesting. They would have liked to have done it face to face.
Yes.
So we had to do it virtually, working with a coach.
Right.
But yeah, I think overall everyone had a better understanding. And now it comes down to how we apply that with working with each other.
Okay. So Mike, if someone is interested in going through the Know Your Why process, who would they contact about that?
Well, we currently don't have anyone at KSC that can actually do it. Like I said, there is, I think I'd have to look the book up and I'll give you a link here later in an email. Simon Sinek's book on knowing your why. And there's a chapter or two in there on how to go do it.
Yeah, if you could send me that link, Mike, that would be great. When I post this, I will just include the link with it as
Okay.
well.
Yep. And I'll have a
It,
couple other links we can post as well on understanding your why and how it works. I'll give you a few links there to help you out.
that would be great. Well, Mike, I really appreciate your time today and sharing your thoughts on the Know Your Why concept and process. And look forward to getting back to work where we can sit down in your office or my office and have those conversations, continue to have the conversations that we've had before. I look forward to that.
Okay. Wonderful. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike. Have a great
Okay.
day.
You're welcome, Tommy. Likewise.
Bye bye.